Welcome to Fast Politics, Rick Wilson.
Molly Jong-Fast, how are you doing today?
I am just great. Should we start with the armed takeover of Washington, D.C., or
You
should we
know, as as
start?
as one as one does, when armed troops are now patrolling the streets of DC, a city which has a lower crime rate than where most of the troops came from these days.
Yeah. What?
These southern governors like Tate Reeves in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, literally is as dangerous as Mogadishu, Somalia.
Hmm.
It is one of the most violent, dangerous cities in the whole country per capita. And yet, somehow Tate Reeves has not deployed his own state National Guard there, but in order to kiss Trump's ass, has sent them to D.C.
So here's a question for you. This weekend, I was somewhere listening to a member of Congress. This was like off the record thing, so I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to say who it is. And somebody asked him a question, which is often asked to members of Congress, said basically, why do they kiss up to Trump?
Mhm.
Why do they ruin themselves at the altar of Trump? Is it because they are ambitious, or is it because they're scared? And he said that he thought it was absolutely because they're scared.
They're scared. Look, I learned this as far back as 2017 when a former client of mine did a town hall and was asked, "Are you going to support Mr. Trump 100%?" And he gave the correct answer at the time. He said, I want to work with Donald Trump on tax cuts and this and that and this and that. But if it's wrong for our district, no, I'm going to stand with you. And by the time he got off stage, he was getting death threats and his family was getting death threats. And so the fear of the mob, the fear of the horde, the fear of the monster that is the MAGA base is what motivates them to stay in line. They don't want to lose their primaries. They also don't want to have crazy people come into their house with guns. That is the not subtle promise that Trump delivered on January 6th is, if you fuck with me, I will have people come to your place of business or your home with violence in their hearts to hurt you. And most of these people, you look, a lot of them are ambitious, but you can also be afraid as well as being ambitious. Those Venn diagrams can sort of overlap, I
Right,
guess.
exactly. As much as everything feels really, really bad, and there are certainly a lot of reasons to feel bad. There is the armed takeover of the district. There is Trump's plan to go roll into Chicago, which we
Uh-huh.
just saw. There are a lot of things to feel bad about Democrats under raising Republicans, this Democratic. You know what I want you to talk to us about is first, I want you to talk to us about these numbers, these voter registration numbers, because last week
Yeah.
this came out that Democrats are basically getting creamed when it comes to voter
Yeah,
registration, and
I can tell you all about this.
I
Let me
was a
tell you
little
how
surprised by that.
I'm not. You know why?
Okay, why?
Because Democrats think they can get fucking volunteers to go do voter registration. Republicans pay money to do it.
Oh,
They
well,
have
that
paid
makes
people
sense.
who do it. So here's the deal. You got a lot of Democratic groups sitting on a pile of money from last year. You got a lot of Democratic groups have a lot of money sitting around. Future Forward has $200 million sitting around. And they're all like, we've got to fix the narrative. No, what you have to do first is go out and register fucking voters. When you stop registering voters, or you believe that you're going to get allied groups to do it. And I've heard this story from Democrats for 10 years now of trying to get them to understand the way Republicans do this is they throw money at the problem. They're not sending volunteer, like young conservatives out. They pay some fucking hobos to go knock on doors and do voter registration. Democrats think that they're going to get the union folks to do it or progressive groups to do it or activist groups. No, stop it. Pay the fucking money. Go out
So
and pay the money.
is that really why? Because the
Yeah.
Democrats are behind by about 4 million
Yes.
votes
Yes.
in
Pay
voter
the money.
registration.
Pay the money. Evangelical churches are the one group of Republicans that do voter reg sort of on the come. They otherwise spend the money. The state parties spend the money. This is an explicable, simple, understandable process. There are people who do this for a living, and they should be using them.
So I want you to talk us through this because Shane Goldmacher had a piece in the New York
I saw it.
Times
I saw it.
that said Democrats are just not as popular, but that's not what this
That's
means.
not what this that's not what it is. That's not what it is. A lot of the drop off with Democratic voters has been because there are a lot of people frustrated with the Democratic Party
Right, for sure.
for a million reasons. We could spend days on this subject,
Yeah.
but most of them
And
don't.
we probably will.
We probably will.
Yeah.
They don't flip to Republican. They drop off to non-party affiliated.
Right.
It is a lot cheaper and simpler to convert a non-party affiliated voter either to Democratic for the first time or to bring them home to the Democratic Party
Right.
because you kind of know who they are. This is not none of this is rocket science. There are
Right.
very good people with data and lists and approaches to these things. They know how to do it. But the Democratic Party has always sort of like, oh, we'll farm this part out to the unions in this city or this state. We'll farm this part out to the college of Democrat. No, stop it. Professionalize.
So who is in charge of this? Is this a Ken Martin problem?
It's a Ken Martin problem.
So
It's
Ken
also a
Martin,
state party problem.
right, but he is the Ken Martin is the chair of the DNC, and
He should
Ken
there should be number look, when Michael Steele took over the Republican Party back in the mid-2000s, he put the money in to registering people and to winning state election stuff, and that took voter reg. We
right.
pushed money out into the parties, like the Georgia Republican Party, Florida Republican Party, North Carolina Republican Party, and said, "Here's $2,000,000. This grant is explicitly for you to do voter registration."
So Ken Martin has these terrible fundraising numbers, just
Yeah,
horrendous. The DNC is getting their clock
yeah.
cleaned by the RNC, despite the fact that Donald Trump is rolling troops into states, despite the fact that,
They're
that
doing it because he's rolling troops into states. They are
yeah,
afraid, just like a lot of these members of Congress are afraid. They now understand, and Trump has delivered this message very coldly, and his people have delivered it. If you're not with us, we will come after you and hurt you. If you don't do what we want, sell us 10% of your company. They're like, we'll hurt you.
but so
We'll use regulation. We'll use the DOJ, whatever.
but so shouldn't Ken Martin still try to raise money for
Yeah, he should still try to
Democrats?
raise money. He should still try to raise money. But when the Democrats take power again, if they, they're what? When they take power again, nothing lasts forever. When they take power again, they need to do exactly what the Republicans have been doing for a generation. They're the ones who get out and they call these companies and go, because right now, the Republican campaign committee people call
Right,
big companies, associations, and go, hey, by the way, if you got one guy or two guys, Democrats in your state, that's okay. But you're going to give a 100-to-1 ratio to us.
right,
And if you don't, we're going to fuck you.
yeah.
And look, this idea of Democrats playing hardball, I know, like, makes the hair stand up on the back of a lot of these softer-minded people who like policy shit, but the reason what California is doing is meaningful,
Mhm.
in response to Texas is because it's the real politics, it's the fight we're really in, not the fight we wanna be in.
Well, and also, if you can't win back the House, you're gonna be fucked.
Oh, yeah, 'cause,
Like
as I've said this, I think I said this on the last show, if there's a Republican majority in 2028 and a
they're
Democrat wins the election, they will
yeah.
not certify him.
No. I
They will
think
not
they're
certify
already
him.
saying that, in
Yeah,
100 different ways.
yeah.
So, I think there's also an argument to be made for soft federalism, this idea that you are the 4th largest economy, and if you don't wanna if why are you putting in tax dollars if you're not getting the FEMA
Look,
relief that you're supposed to?
there's a piece of real talk here. California is the 4th largest economy, not in the country, but in the world,
Yeah.
and the economic power of major states in this country is an underestimated political lever. And the donor states, the blue states giving to the red states, that is an equation that has never been fully explored by
Mhm.
any Democratic state leader that I can think of off the top of my head. And, we're starting to explore these things now, I think, in a way that reflects on the precarious nature of the Republicans' economic model. Part of what they're relying on right now is that somehow Powell is going to cut rates by some double digit number and they're going to juice the economy and go into 26 with a glowing economy again. It's a big bet. But
There's
if you
no evidence to
there's
support
no
that.
none whatsoever. But
Yeah.
if you're a Republican right now, you are worried. You're looking in the rear view about the economy. You're looking in the
Right.
rear view. But a lot of Democrats are saying in these meetings that I go to and listen, go online in these Zooms. It's like, "Well, we're going to run on prescription drugs and Medicare." Once again, there are troops and tanks and armored vehicles in the streets of our capital. We have a president who is running a whorehouse at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We have a president who's about to free a convicted child sex trafficker.
You
And
think he's going to?
oh, absolutely. You read those transcripts from Blanche, that's a setup for days.
So explain.
You go through those transcripts and she's like, "I admire President Trump and all he's accomplished." This
Yeah.
was all pre-gamed. I bet you good money Blanche went to his attorney, her attorney, who
Who's a
who
friend of
who was a
hers?
friend of
His.
Blanche's, right?
Yeah.
And said, "Hey, she's gotta go in the room and say the following things, at minimum." And she did. "I never
Right.
saw Trump anywhere near Jeffrey." "What?" "I never saw him in a massage setting," which to my mind was an interesting sort of gap, because it's like, so you never saw him getting a massage, but you might have seen him with a teenage girl. Blanche didn't ask any questions in
Right. She
response
just
to these.
volunteered.
It was this
Yeah.
thing was a complete mess, and it's a pregame. Nobody should be shocked, and it could happen as early as this week, I think.
But here's a question for you about the Epstein stuff,
Mhm.
because the polling on the Epstein stuff, actually, I'm going to tell you something even stupider than that. So on this episode, I interviewed a guy called Graham Planter, who's
Uh-huh.
running for who is running to be the nominee in Maine
Yes.
to run against Susan Collins.
Yeah, I know who he is.
And he has he, like Jared Gold, has a lot of Congressman Jared Gold, who has an R plus 4, the most rural district, has a lot of Trumper people in
Mhm,
his life. And
mhm.
so I said, did they lose have they lost interest in Trump? Are they, what does it look like? And he said to me that a lot of them are mad about the tariffs. But he also said, and he's like, you're going to think this is crazy. It's worth listening to the interview because I think
I will, yeah.
it's interesting. He said, um, you're going to think this is crazy, but a lot of people are mad about Epstein.
Yeah, they are. Look, this, and we've talked about this, we've written about, both of us have written about this. The Epstein storyline and the idea that there's a global Democratic pedophile network storyline from 2016 on, when Pizza Jack started to invent it, and it became a part of their personalities. It became something they believed in fundamentally. And now they thought they were gonna get this revelation that was gonna take all these Democrats down, and it turns out that Donald Trump put 1,000 FBI agents on the story so he could cover it up,
Right.
so he could take his name out of those files. It turns out they wanna release 70 pages out of over 150,000 pages of testimony and
Right.
documents.
Right.
And so even his own believers are like, "Don't, what the fuck is this, boss?
Right.
Where's the good stuff?"
I think it's worth thinking about this for a second about what happens when, like, this comes back to this fundamental question of 2016
Mhm.
when Bernie Sanders said, "This system is rigged against you." Right? He said it's rigged. There are
Yep,
these people who feel it's rigged.
yep.
And I feel like Trump again somehow was able to make the case that he was going to unrig the system. I don't know how he made that case after having already been president for 4 years, but he, I think the fact that people weren't being offered anything and that he was at least offering them something was meaningful.
I think you're right, and look, there was a reason why about a quarter of Bernie's voters in 2016 went to Trump,
That's crazy.
because there is a non-ideological element in American society today that feels like the system is rigged, and the reason they went with Trump was, even though they knew he was corrupt and scummy, they thought, "Well, at least he's transgressive, at least he's gonna blow everything up, at least he's gonna hurt people that I don't like," and
Yeah.
that, I think that still existed in a probably larger number in some ways by the end of 2024 than was present in 2016. There were a lot of people who still looked at the choices and says, "Okay, she's a standard issue politician, and he's still a terrorist. He's still a crazy man. He's still the guy who's gonna blow shit up." And when you don't have a deep, sophisticated understanding of what's really going on in the world, blowing shit up sometimes sounds awfully appealing.
Well, and also, the reason that they thought the system was rigged against them is because it is.
Yeah, and look, the system now under Trump is being rigged. The transfer of wealth under Donald Trump,
Largest in history
largest in
ever.
history by an order of magnitude. You've shifted the largest amount of wealth in the history of this country from, like, the S&P 500 to 7 tech firms, all of whom support Trump. You've shifted trillions of dollars of government funding from the middle or lower end of the spectrum to tax cuts for about 600 billionaires in this country. And this isn't free market stuff. This isn't the market functioning in a way that hurts poor people. This is crony capitalism being run from the White House. There's a reason why Republicans are fine with this, because they're not, or MAGA voters, excuse me, are fine with this because they're not conservative on anything anymore. They're radical, and Trump is a radical for them. And Mamdani says, I want 6 publicly owned grocery stores in New York, and people shit a brick. Donald Trump says companies now have to pay me VIG. They have to pay me a percentage from now on, or we're going to hurt them. And I'm sorry, Trump's actually the one seizing the fucking means of production here.
Right. If you are someone who doesn't like this,
Yes,
I
yes, I
I
am.
I mean, do you think, like, we've gotten some polls, but nobody trusts polls. We have certainly there is some evidence that people are not happy with this. I mean, like, what do you think? We only know what we know, right? We only see
Right.
what is in our silo. But what do you really think is happening on the ground right now?
Look, I think the economic damage that Trump is doing, and it's a combination of the tariffs, of the big bad bill, and of this shift in our overall economic model, where it's where fewer and fewer companies are controlling more and more stuff,
Right.
where things like homeownership have completely disappeared as a goal for young people, where the trap of student loan debt and the trap of low-paying jobs have combined
Right.
to put a generation, Gen Z, and a lot of millennials into a trap where they're never gonna financially escape. At the
Unless they
same
join
time,
ICE,
right. Well, there is that. Dean
which you
Cain,
can.
man, well, he's
You
doing it.
can't. So ICE is offering the reason I made that joke is
Yeah.
that ICE is offering like a
Yep.
$60,000 student loan debt forgiveness, which
Mhm.
is ironic because the Supreme Court said that Biden's loan
I
forgiveness was
was
not
told that loan
constitutional.
forgiveness was unconstitutional by
Yeah.
the red court, but,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the rules are different for thee and me, as they say.
Thank you, Rick Wilson.